My name is Kulpreet Yadav. I'm one of the co-founders and a director at WLA, that is World Law Alliance. The topic for today's webinar is very interesting and it affects all of us. In fact, the topic is remote working and its legal consequences from Indian employment law perspective. That's the topic, but probably we will be expanding this and also taking into account what is happening in the international arena. Just 30 seconds before I introduce today's panel for all our viewers. Just 30 seconds to introduce World Law Alliance, who we are, what we do. World Law Alliance is a modern-day integrated international practice of law and a global service delivery platform. Through the collaborative innovation of our members around the world in 80+ locations, we deliver exceptional service, tailored advice, and practical, efficient solutions for most complex transactions, disputes, and legal issues. Now that brings us to the panel for today. We have one moderator and we have three panelists. I will begin with the introduction of our moderator first. Mr. Manishi Pathak, may I request you to please raise your hand, though we can see your name. Yes. So Mr. Manishi Pathak is the founder and managing partner of law firm Untitled Law. He specializes in employment law, mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures, and regulatory / compliance matters, including general corporate law advisory matters. Manishi has been listed as a who's who of Indian practitioners of labor and employment laws from 2009 to 2015. Consecutively, I beg your pardon, he has been recognized as the leading employment lawyer in India by Chambers and Partners, besides being recognized amongst the top legal professionals in India by Legal 500. Further, Manishi was recently ranked as elite practitioner by Asia Law and top ranked by Chambers and Partners for Asia Pacific 2022 in labor and employment. That brings me to the panelists for today. I start with Alison Despard. So we have everyone's names. So hello, Alison there. So Alison Despard serves as the Chief Labor and Employment Counsel at Honeywell and is responsible for labor and employment relations across 14 nations. That includes 33,000 employees in the Asia Pacific region. She's based in Singapore. Alison has over 30 years of experience in human resources, labor and employer relations, serving leadership positions. She earned her Bachelor's of Arts degree from the College of William and Mary and her Juris Doctor, that is JD degree from Loyola University School of Law. We have Mr. Sanjeet K. Batra. Sanjeet leads the legal team for the India ABO at Cummins India. In his role, Sanjeet is responsible for Cummins India's legal and secretarial functions. She is a seasoned legal professional with diverse experience of working in the corporate and social sectors, international agencies, and in private practice. Sanjeet has worked extensively on cross-border M&A, divestitures, and restructuring transactions, corporate governance, and antitrust, beg your pardon, as well as intellectual property-related issues. She is actively involved in policy advocacy as a member of various committees of leading industry associations in India. We have Prashanth Pandey. Prashanth Pandey is currently working as the Chief Legal Counsel for the India Global In-House Center of Marsh and McLennan Companies Incorporation. He advises the business on all legal, regulatory, governance, employment, ethics, reputational, and policy matters with a view to protect and grow the Marsh McLennan business in India. He also works closely with global legal and compliance colleagues on financial crimes, operational risks, and privacy matters. Prashanth sits on various company boards and risk committees for Marsh McLennan in India. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this high-powered panel discussion. With this, I give the floor to Mr. Manishi Pathak.
Thank you, Gulpreet, for your kind introduction for everyone and myself. As you rightly mentioned, it's a very interesting session that we will be looking at today. And since at the beginning of the 2022, and we're expecting that there will be some regulatory changes in this year post some of the state elections that get over, which hopefully should be in the first quarter of 2022 in India. We thought that it's an interesting subject to look at because how the world is changing or how the pandemic has changed the world, it has impacted the workplace. It has become until few years back, when you look at it, was not too much talked subject, but of late it has become a highly discussed subject, especially in the absence of specific legislations in some jurisdictions such as India. Uh, India was India had made a reference to work from home only during the time when it brought an amendment to the Maternity Benefit Act, and it slightly made a reference to that employer and employee can agree, and if they mutually agree, the female worker can also operate from home within the agreed or for the agreed period of time. Uh, Now, last 2 years, several issues have come up. We have, 2022 when the COVID started happening and government directives started coming out, asking people to work from home. Several directions came, especially for the service sector, because the government assumed that these are people who can work from home. Initially, every implementation was done across board, irrespective of the company that you are in. Then they were moderated and essential services were exempt. Then in the manufacturing sector, some companies, some states passed on directions where employees were not reporting to work, asking them to report to work. But largely, we have seen the remote working or work from home kind of a concept evolving. While government has used the expression work from home in all its directives, all of a sudden the concept of remote working came out, which is a bit unusual because it used to be assumed that when you are talking about work from home, home is a primarily a location which is within the jurisdiction an employee has been assigned to work from. Remote working opened a new dimension because remote working came out with the concept that you could be anywhere in the country or you could be overseas and working. While remote working is not a concept that Indian government has looked at, they primarily continue to use expression work from home. Remote working as a concept that has been, or expression which has been used across different jurisdictions. And if I could give a little reference to the research that we did and we figured as to what is happening, it was quite surprising that we came up, or rather, we got to know through reports published by World Economic Forums and several other publications that have given how the remote working or work from home is looking at. Now, we looked at some of the data. So there are some international companies that have embraced permanent work from home culture, like Novartis, Twitter, Shopify, Spotify, Facebook. Some of these companies have adopted a complete work from home policy. Some companies have gone a hybrid model. So Google, Ford, Microsoft, Reddit, Amazon, TCS. Now, when you look at the companies that have gone to completely work from home and also companies that have gone a hybrid model, it's a little surprising because some of the companies are in the IT sector, while some of them have gone completely work from home culture. Most have still kept the hybrid model on. Now, when we look at some Indian companies that have adopted work from home model, TCS, Razorpay, Oyo, Infosys. So see that some of the companies, TCS, some of the companies to name, that have adopted a work from home culture. Now, in terms of data that we looked at in 2022, the statistics, it says that 16% of the companies in the world are 100% remote. 44% of the companies do not allow remote work. People choose to go for a better work-life balance because when they do a remote work, 77% of the remote workers say that they are more productive than working from home. While all these data are questionable, they vary from company to company. 85% of the managers believe that having teams with remote workers will become the new norm. 74% of the workers say that having an option to work remotely would make them less likely leave a company. Again, with a question mark. The three biggest challenges that are associated with the remote work, which we are also going to discuss in the topic that we have. Number one is unplugging after work, which is 22% of the people said that. Second is the loneliness. And third is the communication and collaboration. That is, again, all these three topics are going to be important for the purpose of our panel discussion. In terms of looking at Indian laws, as I said, other than the Maternity Benefit Act, which provided the concept of work from home, there's no specific statute that refers to work from home kind of a scenario. So you pick up from a Shops Act, which will be applicable to a non-manufacturing kind of a setup, or to the Factories Act. The concept of work from home is completely not at all discussed in any of the statute, and that gives birth to several operational aspects. Now, in terms of what is happening internationally, when I look at the data, US came out with the guidance note on teleworking. It's a concept that US and or the North America came up with. The telework, which was primarily applicable to federal government. Canada came up with a similar concept, which was applicable for the teleworking, and they provided several guidance notes for the federal government employees and organizations that need to follow. Now, when we look at some of the data from other countries, like Argentina has came out with a teleworking law. Belgium similarly has come out with a statute where work from home is allowed. Chile, Luxembourg, Mexico, all Portugal, Russia, Spain, all of them seem to have come out with something or the other where they have discussed about work from home. Some have introduced labor codes, some have brought in amendments to the existing statutes. So far India is concerned, we have nothing to talk about. So I thought it will be relevant to look at, share this data with our audiences and panelists to see the issues that have come up. In terms of, in last 2.5 years, the issues that we have faced, several misconduct issues that have surfaced. Companies are grappling with the issue of how to manage working hours, because some of these issues that we talk about also have sub-issues associated with them. So when I look at working hours, there's also an issue of leave entitlement. If I look at it, pick up an issue of working hours, it also leads to overtime discussion. If I pick up a work during a week or during the working days, it also involves work during holidays or weekly offs that by statute every employer is expected to provide. There are issues in terms of how to manage company properties. There are health and safety aspects. There are workplace conduct issues, some of them resulting into sexual harassment, even remotely being happening. So there are instances where complaints of sexual harassment have been reported, even in a remote working environment. Moonlighting, another thing that people could think that they could regulate and control while you're sitting within an office premises and working on the company properties. The concept of double employment may not be there, but that has emerged. And we have been part of several such matters where we had to conduct investigations or inquiries. Protection of intellectual property of the company, confidential information. These are some of the issues that have surfaced. Now, I'll move on to the discussion to my panelists because they all come from very esteemed companies, have very, very long experience in terms of issues dealing with. My first question is that, first of all, how do you see remote working or work from home affecting the jurisdiction of the companies that you are aware of? Let me start with Alison.
Sure. I think particularly because COVID is here to stay for a bit, in many of our countries, including India, we can't come back full time per COVID regulation. So we are going to continue remote working for some time. And I see even how we work remotely has really evolved. I think the use of video is much more common. How we do team meetings or get-togethers. You can't have a full day meeting anymore, but you might chunk it into different, there are a lot of ways to address some of the concerns that we have And particularly, the turning off, we certainly found that the productivity went really up, particularly, and again, maybe after COVID, things will change, but everybody knows everybody's under lockdown and they can't really go anywhere. So they're readily available. And so I think that might be one of the issues as well. I mean, I know a best practice certainly is to remind managers, not weekends, not late hours, or if you send an email during those times, even not remote working, please make it clear that you're not expected to respond right away. But I think definitely we'll see remote working for some time. And, we already have, I know you listed a lot of the companies that are, or a lot of the countries that are considering laws, but if you look at Australia, an accommodation for a carer, if you have, if you're over 50, if you have a medical condition, if you have children that are school age, is to work from home. And certainly in the US, as an ADA accommodation, you have to consider as an employer working from home. So even a lot of you might not have a specific statute that addresses this new scenario that we're working from home due to COVID, and then maybe we want to continue that from a work-life balance or attracting employees. But there are a lot of statutes that we already look at, to kind of fill in the analysis to decide, what is, and, places like Australia already have really robust health and safety requirements if somebody works from home. And we have very detailed agreements with the person saying, we'll do it for 3 months and then we'll review it. And here's all the things that you have to certify about your home environment and let us know, because it's not like we're going to go in and audit those things. So I think there's a lot to look at some of these countries that have already had parts of it, and steal some of those best practices. So certainly from my vantage point, I can pull from different countries where we already have a really robust framework and say, well, if we are going to even go like 3-2 or something in the future, as opposed to full work from home, what does that look like? And if we are going to have somebody full work from home, what does that look like? And, just an aside, we actually started making sure we were video interviewing people, because we had somebody show up that wasn't the person that was interviewed. And I'm sure other people have run into that too, that, they had a bunch of great interviews and then the managers finally saw this guy on a team call. He's like, that's not the guy I hired, I'm pretty sure. So, how do we all start from a practical perspective dealing with a lot of the workarounds or the interesting issues that have come up? And I think the more we have dialogues like this, that's going to help us all, think of those ahead and prepare for those.
That's quite interesting. Sanjit?
So it's a learning curve, I think, for all of us. When we were hit with COVID, I think we were all scrambling for a few months and, start thinking that, it's just a temporary situation, a few months and we'll be out of it. But as, we all know, it's not going to happen so soon. And with each day, I think a lot of companies are evolving and coming up with better policies to enable people and employees to continue working from work from home. I feel it's a trend that's going to continue at least for the next few years. And we see a lot of companies already classifying employees as totally offsite, hybrid, and employees who have to be in office or factories or R&D labs every day. So those policies are already being rolled out. It's not been an easy journey because it was too much of a change for both the companies and for the employees. But I personally feel that we're all doing better than we were. And now, of course, there's a lot of reluctance for people to go back to the earlier model of being in office every day. Everyone has just got used to the flexibility, and there's already a lot of talk of not just flexible employment policies, but also trends like, gig workers. You have people who would be joining for a while on projects, etc. And especially with the younger generation, I think it's a reality that's already there and is only going to increase in the next few years. Of course, there are a plethora of problems, but my view is that so far, there's nothing which is a deal breaker. The companies have to be vigilant. There's a lot of emphasis leadership teams and how they are handling the whole situation, because over communication is what seems to be working and making life better for the employees in general. So a lot of onus is on the top management to make sure that whether we are talking about employee morale and and just connectivity, the focus is on the right things. But I think the trend is here to stay, at least for the next few years, till we have another cycle of change, and who knows what we'll land up with then.
Okay, I think you and Ellison raised some very good points, and I'll come back to them because they'll be in the later part of our discussion in terms of issues or challenges that are coming up. Prashanth, I'll be happy to hear, since you also have a good number of companies.
Sure. So our experience has not been very different from what Ellison and Sanjit said about their own experiences. Given that we come from different industries, the experience has been the same when we were all hit with COVID. So at least COVID has done something to unite us all. So if I sort of rewind back, before COVID, our entire work from home scheme was sort of bifurcated into business versus support. So business colleagues, marketing, sales, the whole lot of business colleagues, they had access to remote working. They had access, not remote working, mostly work from home, because they were supposed to be on site with clients. They were supposed to travel. So there was a lot more flexibility that the firm globally had in terms of them. And then when it came to core operations and support, there were very few roles in which we had sort of organized work from home as a policy or as a protocol, as a process. And then again, if I look at it from a two-dimensional view, even in operations, there were colleagues sitting out of India and colleagues in India. So colleagues sitting out of India still had much more flexibility. So we, when COVID happened, sort of 85% people sitting in our service centers in Norwich in UK or Hoboken in US had access to work from home. But when we looked at our India service centers, where we had some 10,000 people sitting, only 40% people had work from home. And all of a sudden, the lockdown happened, and there was no access to office. So we saw the first 3 months of the lockdown getting and shipping laptops to people to their addresses. IT had to work all around the clock to figure a way to remotely enable people, because all our hardwares all our software, all our protocols were set up in a way that you could not access anything from outside the office. So any new joiner would have to join from office, no matter, even if afterwards you get work from home. So we saw a lot of processes change on the IT side, even on the talent acquisition side. Till 2019, we were making people sign physical contracts when they were joining. They were signing up to employment contracts. We had access to remote and e-signing, but we were not using that as a practice across the institution. So we've seen all of that change, and it has been a learning on the go. So we started distributing laptops to people. We realized they did not have routers and internet connectivity. Then HR came with the policy saying that we will reimburse people who take high-speed internet. And all of a sudden, we realized that there were too many reimbursement requests coming in. Then controllership and finance walked in, and they said they'll put a cap of 1,000 rupees per month or 500 INR per month. And that happened globally because people all of a sudden realized they could reimburse their internet bills and so on and so forth. So one step at a time, we have been enabling people, and then policies have always been catching up. So we did not have a work from home policy. We were aware that colleagues in UK, as per the local laws there, were required to be given a separate setup when they were working from home, including a fire extinguisher, including a place to work. over here in India, we realized people were having health issues because 3 months into work from home, they all started showing cervical issues and spinal issues because they were sitting anywhere. So in Mumbai itself, we shipped some 3,000 chairs and 3,000 tables to colleagues to set up an office at home. So, and then again, there was an HR policy, there was a controllership environment around it. So we have been learning on the go, Manish, and I think in the last 2 years now we have landed at a position where we think we will, at least that's what we're hearing from the other IT and ITES companies as well as from BFSI, that hybrid work from home is going to continue because we have invested in technology, in processes, in people, and the COVID mess does not seem anywhere going anytime soon. So we feel that for the next 18 to 24 months, we will continue in a hybrid model. Even if we were to be free of COVID tomorrow, we are not going to bring everyone to office. We just don't want to take the risk. At no point of time we will have more than 50% people in the office because we don't want a scenario where a large part of our population of colleagues gets infected. So we will continue with it, and we'll keep on developing policies and processes to combat whatever we come up with.
Okay. So Prashanth, you made a point with respect to a hybrid workforce. Now, when we look at the hybrid workforce, are you saying that it's more the leadership team is going to be working from offices, or you see non-leadership roles also being called to work from offices?
So until now, we have not made any non-leadership roles come to office for work. So ever since COVID happened, everyone who comes into office comes on a voluntary basis. We are not asking people to come. So return to office has not happened formally. Non-management colleagues are not required to come to office unless and until they have something which can, or some duty or some task that cannot be done from home. It's only management colleagues who are expected, within quotes, to come to office once in a week or twice in a week. But again, we are not forcing it. But that has been the experience in India. In US, we took a decision last year that COVID has gone, and we abruptly decided to call everyone to office. There was a prior notice of 30 odd days given to people, and people were told that they will have to come back to office. September, October onwards, we brought everyone to office. And by November, we said, you don't need to come to office. Omicron has happened. So it was blowing hot, blowing cold at the same time. UK, London, we have opened our office. There are some 3,000 to 5,000 people in London. We have again left it optional. As Sanjit and Alison were seeing, we are seeing a desire from most people to not want to come to office. So even in Omicron, our colleagues were not comfortable coming in office. It's a different matter. They were all holidaying in Wales and other places later on. But whenever we spoke about office, everyone was very uncomfortable. So we have not been able to regiment people coming back to office especially because of Omicron. And we are back to square one where we were. And the return to office plans are yet to commence, I think, from April onwards.
Okay. So I think you made two comments, and I'll take that as a cue to Alison and Sanjit. You made on a voluntary basis. You suggested that people who want to come to office, they'll give an option to work. Do you think that you also see the same kind of a scenario happening, or you think that it will be mandatory that some people must come and work from office, especially the critical roles? Alison.
Yeah, I think it depends on the company. I know we have done a number of, like Prashanth, we've had, as COVID kind of comes and goes, we've done soft openings where we have about 30% primarily leadership to come in and demonstrate that it's safe and our HSE is working, and we have all the distancing and all the hygiene stuff. And then, we have a lot of places where we're rotating. I think Singapore, we just started back 50-50 because everybody's required by law to be vaccinated here, or they can be terminated, so people feel a little bit safer. But we also have escapes, that people can raise their hand, no questions asked. I'm uncomfortable coming back. I live with a vulnerable person. So I think there will be a lot of, I think there needs to be, from a company and employee relations perspective, there needs to be a sensitivity to the fact that it still is really scary. People are coming on public transportation. I mean, country to country, it varies significantly. And you know how strict people are in following the regulations, things like that. So I think you know, we do the best that we can, but I do see that, you know, I don't see, you know, I'm pretty clear that we're not going to be one of the companies that has a large portion of our workforce totally working from home. It will be some type of, you know, right now they're doing in the US a 3-2, and that may stay, right? Because people like the flexibility, but it still has people coming into the workplace on a pretty regular basis. And that allows for, you know, you have to sign up and do all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of sophisticated systems behind that, but then that allows for more space and better utilization of your real estate, lower costs, all that kind of stuff. So there's great ways to make it a win-win for the business and the employees at the same time.
Okay, I think I'll break this into a more informal word. In terms of Sanjit, do you see that a lot of people seem to be desirous to come to workplace? While you said that there was more interest people were showing in working from home, do you think that the trend is now changing, and some of those issues that we will discuss later, or maybe you can touch upon even now if you want to, do you think that there is an inclination in a certain segment to come and work from office?
Actually, I think it's people don't want to be off-site 100% and they don't want to be on-site 100% because obviously they're enjoying the flexibility, and especially with kids still being at home, etc. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done at home, but people are also missing collaborating and working on new projects, sharing of ideas, etc., which are obviously better if it's going to be a face-to-face scenario. So my sense is that most of the companies would have to come up with some kind of a model where it's going to be flexible, but teams come together to office on certain days and work from home certain days, etc. So except for factories, manufacturing staff and R&D staff, most of the other people can get into some kind of a hybrid working. There would be issues like, what's going to be the base location, etc. Because a lot of policies are revolve around what the base location of an employee is. But I don't think, and I don't foresee all employees coming back 100% of the time in the near future.
Okay. Now, one concept that I discussed in the beginning was work from home and remote working. So are companies now looking at both as interchangeable terms, or it is the base location that is being taken? If you're working from home, your base location is the office where you were employed or you were expected to report to or work from. Let me start with Prashanth. What is it that you have in place? I mean, are you looking at a work from home or you're looking at a remote working scenario? There's an absolute flexibility with either of them.
So Manishi, we are looking at a work from home hybrid sort of a model in which, as we call it, office is going to be the center of gravity. So for all colleagues, office continues to be the center of gravity with much more flexibility, meaning we will leave it to the local country officers to decide on a 3-2 or a 3-2 or a 2-3 type of a model where they decide what days to be in office and what days to be at home. But because office will be where all the action will be, colleagues will be expected to be in the base location. That is where their office is located, the office to which they are posted, to which they are tagged. They have to be in that city or in that borough or in that area. In India, we'll sort of put it as a city, because we don't want scenarios where colleagues cannot come to office and they need lots and lots of prior notice to be given. Because if they are living at a considerable distance from the office, then that's not truly working from home with flexibility. That's remote working. And as an institution, we have not gone ahead with remote working. We tried to build a case for it, because at least for our service center colleagues in India, because a number of companies, IT companies, social media companies, IT intermediaries, etc., have decided to permanently go for remote working, where you can work from the confines and from the comforts of your home. You need not travel to larger city, make those lifestyle changes only to do a job that you can do from your home. But institutionally, we took a call that we were not ready and we wouldn't want to go in that direction. I can obviously later, if time permits, and if you want to talk about some of the reasons why we didn't want to go in that direction. But for now, we will continue to focus on a hybrid model and no remote working.
Okay, I think that's interesting, and we'll discuss about the part which we have not touched upon. Alison, do you see, what is your view on it?
Yeah, so I mean, in India in particular, we're studying, does it make sense to do what some of the tech companies are doing, allow people to go to their home place and take a pay cut, right? Because it's obviously much cheaper to live there. So I think that's something they're looking at. But from a legal exposure perspective, to me, even that I would require in the contract that they have to work within that state, because you get into so many issues with the wandering employee. I mean, even in the United States, when you travel from state to state, I'm sure it's the same within India, the exposure, the taxes, any place that employee ends up working, they're subject to those employment laws. They're subject to leave. They're subject to, overtime requirements, everything like that. And we're not equipped to, have I guess we could, we don't want to do that. And so, even we had a bunch of people caught in 2020 who had traveled for Chinese New Year and couldn't get back to where they were going, or who had gone on work stuff. And I had a spreadsheet of people and the time ticking, because 6 months is a big deal for permanent establishment exposure and employment taxes and all that kind of stuff, of how are we going to get these people back? Are we going to put them on local payroll where they're caught? So there are a lot of issues for, what we've seen in the media of, go to a beach location in another country and set up shop. From a labor and employment attorney's perspective, that's a bit of a nightmare if you have, 130,000 employees, some of them, kind of wandering around. We have a lot of exposure. There's a lot of legal developments that need to happen in order to facilitate the world employees doing that. So, there's remote locations where you're in a permanent location. We know where you are and you're meant to be working from there, so we can control the exposure. Or there's that other, the idea of I have a laptop, I can go wherever I want. I don't see that happening for a lot of companies, because it's just challenging from the regulation perspective. We can't comply with the laws if that happens.
Right. So before I move on to Sanjit, if you see the halo around me, it doesn't mean that I have attained enlightenment. It's the power failure in the area. Okay.
Wondering.
Okay, Sanjit, over to you.
I would pretty much reiterate what Alison said in terms of, I think from a legal perspective, it would be very challenging if we had wandering employees. So the concept of, base location becomes very important. And
right.
So I think in terms of just the productivity, most of the companies would be willing to offer flexibility, but it is important that, they are within reach of the office for team meetings, any other important projects, etc. So base location would, I think, make more sense from a legal as well as, just a organization perspective.
Okay. I think it's very interesting because there's quite a commonality in the points that all three of you made. We have actually observed the same situation in several matters that came to our notice, and where our intervention or opinion was sought. There have been instances where people are sitting in a shack in Goa and sitting on their computer and drinking beer, and attending a workshop or a seminar or a team meeting, because company had not provided what is the work from home. They took the benefit of it. There have been instances where people did not report where they are going. They went to a resort somewhere in a hill station, and they were completely cut off for a couple of days. despite having promised that there's an internet connectivity in that, in that area. So they, we have the same issues. Now, in terms of, the challenges that you think are coming, this was one of the challenges of work from home or remote working. What are the other issues that you are actually facing? Because that will be good to know whether we have common issues across board or there are different, across different companies or jurisdictions. I'll start with Alison.
There are a couple that we've already seen crop up, which I'm sure are common. It is more challenging for certain employees to be managed remotely, right, or at home. And certain jobs it's just harder, particularly. So we are doing, we're looking at doing a little bit more monitoring, which again, you have to go through all the different privacy laws and inform people and all that kind of stuff. So, but from a practical perspective, we've had some performance issues where managers are having difficulty finding their employees. The other thing is, I think you touched on it in the beginning, we've had some mental health issues with just isolation, and not being plugged in, and even substance abuse, alcohol abuse or something like that, where the things are blurring, and it's harder if somebody's not walking in the office to observe, are they slurring, are they walking appropriately, and then you have your I don't know, it's kind of the bucket together of, there are just too many people in the house and you're interrupted. And, I have this issue. My one son is a very exuberant individual, and he comes home at 3:45 and screams at the top of his lung every day. I have to make sure I put it on mute. They're just the interferences, or the dog barks when, the groceries are delivered or something like that. So there's that interference, but also the health and safety. And I think Prashanth was talking about that, people are hunched over at their desks, and, it's not optimal working conditions. And how is that, in the US, certainly in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of laws around that, about how much you have to pay and what you have to do. And a lot of the companies that, like Prashanth's company, were doing things. But a lot of other companies are like, well, we can't afford that, and, try to do it the best you can. And, I find that particularly in Asia with some of our newer employees that may be still living with their families and their grandparents, and, they're at the kitchen table and their brother's over there. So there are a lot of, so I think from my perspective, one of the things I would build in, if we're going to have a more, if you're going to use that flexibility, I would probably put that you have a room that has a door that you can be completely private to address, you don't want, particularly in HR and legal, you don't want people overhearing, even if it's your grandma, without her hearing aid. But it's inappropriate for a lot of these topics to be overheard by anyone. We're meant to be professional and have confidences and things like that. And even, a lot of it, I think you touched on it in the beginning too, there's a lot of IP and different things. And, even though it's your family, it's still not appropriate. You need a space where you can shut the door, lock the door, and nobody's going to bother you, and you can work, right? So that's right. What I see.
Oh, that's quite interesting, because before I move on to Sanjit or Prashanth, in some of the countries where the remote working has been allowed, they've actually made it clear that employee has to upload the areas from where he or she is going to work. They have to give those pictures. They have to confirm that there is a door, it's an isolated area, and they have to sign an agreement pursuant to which an employer can actually go and visit the premises to ensure that the pictures that have been uploaded are exactly of the same place. Okay. But let me move on to Sanjit and ask this as to what are the points that you want to talk about here.
Besides the point that Alison has already mentioned, with regard to mental health and infrastructure, etc., I'll just talk about the legal issues. So the biggest concern as a lawyer would be the confidentiality part. This information floating around, company confidential information floating around in all remote locations. Just making sure that that is protected. Then the second big issue would be the IT security. Things, how is that handled with people logging into different networks, etc.? Are the right firewalls, right IT security systems in place? Those two are, I think, the critical issues generally. And then there is stuff like, the reimbursement issues, the nuances of sexual harassment. If anyone is being harassed, would it be construed as sexual harassment even if it's online, the sensitization, etc. So generally, Manishi, my sense is that the onus now on employees to make it work, because we expect employees to be cognizant of their responsibilities when it can be ethical, do the work sincerely, etc. But the monitoring from the office, those controls that existed pre-COVID, I don't think they can really be replicated in a hybrid or a remote location system. So those are some of the challenges, and a lot of, I think, sensitization work needs to be done to make sure that the employees are on the same wavelength and understand the concerns when it comes to these kind of issues.
Okay. Prashanth?
Yes, Manishi, similar to what Alison and Sanjit said, I'll briefly touch on the legal stroke risk-related challenges that we have seen. So integrity, dual employment, moonlighting, all of these things, we sort of have policies around that. We have policies how outside interests will be allowed. Our contracts specifically prohibit this, but we don't know what we don't know. We don't know in working from home, is a colleague, or can a colleague work for two companies, different shifts? Yes, technically it's possible, and there's no way short of policing them that we'll ever be able to find out. So that's a risk which is an inherent risk in the model. Similarly, there are certain privacy and security related challenges. So we have a very elaborate security setup. So even when any colleague is logging on into office network using their home Wi-Fi, there is dual encryption and so on and so forth. But the susceptibility of a private network to a cyber attack, no matter what we do, is always going to be higher than that of a company network or a safe company router, so to say. Similarly, privacy, we have done a number of privacy related safeguards. We have implemented them from day one, because a lot of the data that companies like us handle might be GDPR protected data or might be a CCPA protected data. But today, so we can stop, we can do DLP and ensure that there is a privacy requirement, no data leaves out of the system. We can disable the USB drives and editing rights in the systems. But as Alison was saying, if people are sitting there and working together in a room, crammed up apartments, we don't know what information goes out by accident. So there could be accidental disclosures of information. That's a worry. So that's what we see on the legal side. And on the employee side and performance and the business side, there are a number of risks. So the time to onboard and train colleagues, be it in IT, be it in operations, be it in legal, has gone up. It was easier to train people face to face. It is getting very difficult to train people when we are training them on Zoom. We are seeing increasing requests in probation periods being extended, employees not being confirmed. And there's also the whole bit around asocial behavior of newcomers. They are not in a position to relate to an organization. They are not in a position to form a team, and we are seeing a lot of early attrition. So typically in India and a lot of other countries, you don't exit a company in the first 3 to 4 months. That is potentially considered as a wrong hire. And that's increasing because people, they don't relate to your organization and they make a switch very soon. Exactly. So these are some of the challenges that we are seeing on the people side as well.
Yeah, I think these are 2 more points we may be able to cover, because we just have about 10 minutes left and we need to leave it for Q&A also. Apart from the interviews that Alison spoke about, that now interviews are being conducted through a video, we have come across instances. In one instance, there was a lady who was hired and she had not disclosed that she's getting married on the date or a day before her joining. And the day her joining was supposed to happen, she, appeared to be decked up as a new bride. And as I'm given to understand, the team manager was completely shocked because she announced on the first date of her joining the company that she is now married, and she sent out a mail to the colleague to her manager that she would want to proceed on a leave for 7 days because she is going on a honeymoon. And the manager was completely shocked that I can't even give her training for the next 1 week or 10 days. Another incident, a person was interviewed. Again, taking the point that Alison made, this person was hired, no video interviews. On the date of joining, a person surfaces and he said, I cannot work for now 2 weeks because my left arm is fractured and I cannot work for the next 2 weeks. And company had no clue what to do now because person is on board now and he's now applied for a medical leave despite not being eligible. Now, 2 more points I will pick from this. You spoke about social connect, missing the team get-togethers or, the collective workforce kind of a feeling or team feeling missing. Do you think that these issues are going to become larger in future, as Prashanth, taking a cue from what you said, because people are distanced from each other? How do you think that this is going to get addressed?
Absolutely. I think and which is why it is important that we go to the hybrid model, COVID notwithstanding. At some stage, we will have to start to get some people on a rotational basis back to the office. When work from home started, we interviewed a number of business colleagues and we asked them, how was it working? 2020, 6 months into the process, they said, oh, this was amazing. They did not realize there's so much benefit in working from home. This should be the only model. Offices are not the center of gravity, so on and so forth. We interviewed them again in 2021 and the message had changed. It does not work. It is not worth the time. People need company. They need to be together. So, and that has happened across businesses, just not with us. So we are all creatures of habit and we continue to be social. So I think these problems, if left as it is, are only going to grow, which is why one of the things that we have learned from others and we are also trying to implement is, subject to obviously COVID and other things, new joiners should mandatorily attend office for a defined period of time. Now, our HR colleagues have still not framed a policy around it, but the initial 3 to 6 months, we need people in the office. We need them to understand the culture, to bond with people, and to learn the trade. It's unfair, even for a colleague, to be told it's not working when that person is sitting in front of a system half the day and not having any human connect, any physical connect with anyone. So, these tractions, I hope, will help, but there is no substitute. We have tried to do more virtual meetings. We have tried automation where we took away a number of responsibilities from our HR colleagues and put it in bots so that they can focus on more people related work. They don't have, so all the query management, etc., went on to bots and technology so that HR practitioners could focus on people. But having said that, these things only work to an extent and there's no substitute for an in-person connect.
Okay. I think I just take one more question only for Alison and Sanjit. Do you think that the role of leadership or the involvement of leadership or the burden on the leadership is going to increase more now in the work from home or remote working scenario? Alison and then Sanjit.
I think it has to if there's going to be a hybrid model, because I think I saw a survey once that the leadership kind of wanted everyone back at the office because, they have the nicest office and everybody pays attention to them. And, now on Zoom, they're just one of how many people on Zoom. But I think they're going to have to learn how to connect with their teams in a non-traditional way. So I think it's going to take more. It's going to be a lot of out of the box thinking and a little bit more on how do I pull my team together? How do I have this team spirit? Even with the hybrid model, when people are working from home, how do I make meetings more engaging? How do I get involvement? I think, they'll be more required of a good leader.
Right. Sanjit.
Absolutely. I think the onus is a lot on leadership teams to make it work. Also because they have become accountable for the productivity in their respective teams. You know, when we are giving flexibility to employees, there has to be someone who's monitoring what's happening. And and things like with so many changing regulations, which state is allowing plants to open, what are the COVID related norms, etc. At the end of the day, the buck stops with the leadership team to make sure that the organization is fully compliant. So both from a people perspective as well as from a process and compliance perspective, I think the onus is on the leadership team, and the engagement that we have seen since COVID struck, where earlier the leadership team maybe was meeting once a month. Now it's almost like a weekly connect to make sure that everything is being followed, all the protocols are there, what are the COVID's, if somebody is impacted with COVID, how is that situation being handled, etc.
Okay, I think I have a lot to ask, and we are running close to almost an hour. I had read a tagline almost 35 years back on one of the products that time will tell the difference. So now I think we just need to have patience and see how the time is going to tell us whether it's going to turn out to be the best model, or we are going back to the models that we earlier had. But thank you very much. I mean, it's been very interesting. I could have easily taken another hour of yours, but let me, with this thanks, I hand it over to Kulpreet.
Yeah, Mr. Manishi, there is a question, and I think we do have time for this question. If you can kindly take it.
Sure.
Can you see it on the screen? Okay, let me read it out then. Yeah, so hi panel members. With respect to remote working, what are the central and state laws to be complied with by the company heavily engaging its talent on remote working basis? For instance, the company has physical office at Mumbai and it engages talents across the country. With all central and state laws to be complied, and would there be any significance of the states / cities where the employees are residing or working?
Okay, I
So
think
Prashanth
Prashanth, Sanjit, and Alison all answered this. But yes, both are going to, or state regulations are going to be important. And in most of the statutes, depending on the base location of an employee, those statutes will actually have will supersede the other state, irrespective of where the person is working. Because if base location has been declared an office, that is where a person should really be, the company is trying to apply the statutes applicable in that state. If anyone wants to make a comment, please feel free.
So I agree, Manishi. So we'll have to look at the base location, the contracts, the central and state laws for Maharashtra in this particular case, and the central laws. But aside of that, depending on the line of business and the industry, there will be other laws that will apply as well. So if the office is based out of a SEZ location, you'll have to look at the foreign trade policy and the SEZ relaxations that have come. They have come for STPI as well. So based on that, a number of other laws will have to be navigated, and this is going to be a very onerous compliance obligation to carry forward for a long period of time.
Okay, I think there's another question we can take. Kulpreet, are you also looking at the same question? We had a similar situation where new hire did join and came to know person is on a holiday on the station. How do you address this situation? As mostly remote joinings are happening and in persons are not possible. So it's exactly going to be covered through a company policy that company puts in place, and sensitize people about the policy that before they join or when they join, they should be aware of that when they are joining, where they are joining, what their terms and conditions of joining are, availability for training, other programs is. So this is actually going to be governed through a contract or a company policy that is put in place, because none of the statutes make any reference to these practical issues.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Manishi. I think we come to the end of the session. It was a very exciting and very insightful discussion, a lot of takeaways. We will be sharing this video on social media platforms. So thank you very much to each participant. Thank you to all the audience. Bye-bye from me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.